Yes, it is generally allowable by the National Electrical Code to have receptacles in cabinets above the kitchen counter off the same circuit as the kitchen counter small appliance receptacles. According to the NEC section 210.52, the 3 additional small appliance branch circuits can supply other receptacles in the kitchen and other specified areas. Also, section 220.19 states that toaster ovens are considered fixed appliances. In the specific situation, the new receptacles in the cabinet above the kitchen counter would be considered additional small appliance branch circuit receptacles, and toaster ovens and microwaves are small appliances. Therefore, connecting the new receptacles in the cabinet to the same circuit as the small appliance receptacles below would generally be permissible under the NEC. However, it is important to consider several factors. Firstly, circuit load. If the circuit breakers may trip if the toaster oven and microwave are used simultaneously, calculate the total load on the circuit to ensure it does not exceed the circuit breaker rating. Secondly, NEC requirements. While the NEC allows for additional small appliance receptacles on the same circuit, it also requires that the circuit provide adequate protection for the appliances connected to it per section 240.4. Thirdly, local codes. Some local jurisdictions may have additional requirements for kitchen circuits and appliance connections. Fourthly, recommended practice. While it may be technically allowable to connect the new receptacles to the existing circuit, it is generally not advisable to do so if the circuit is likely to be overloaded. It is better practice to install a separate circuit for the additional receptacles to ensure adequate capacity for the appliances. In conclusion, yes, it is generally allowable by the NEC to have receptacles and cabinets above the kitchen counter off the same circuit as the small appliance receptacles below. However, it is important to consider the circuit load capacity and ensure compliance with all applicable code requirements. It is recommended to install a separate circuit for the additional receptacles if there are concerns about circuit overloading. Let's delve deeper into the specifics of the National Electrical Code and how it relates to kitchen receptacle installations. We'll explore the nuances of small appliance branch circuits and what constitutes acceptable and safe practices. The NEC, as a comprehensive set of guidelines for electrical installations, aims to protect people and property from hazards arising from the use of electricity. It's not just a set of rules, but a framework for ensuring electrical safety and efficiency. In the context of kitchen receptacles, especially those serving small appliances, the NEC has specific requirements to address the high demand for power in this area. Understanding these requirements is crucial for electricians, contractors, and homeowners alike. Let's start with the basics. A small appliance branch circuit, as defined by the NEC, is a circuit that serves receptacles in the kitchen, pantry, dining room, and similar areas. These circuits are intended to supply power to small appliances such as toasters, coffee makers, blenders, and, as mentioned, toaster ovens and microwaves. The NEC typically requires at least 220 amp small appliance branch circuits to serve the kitchen countertop receptacles. This requirement is in place to ensure that there is sufficient capacity to handle the simultaneous use of multiple appliances. Now let's address the specific question of whether receptacles above the kitchen counter can be connected to the same small appliance branch circuit as the countertop receptacles. As we've established, the NEC permits this under certain conditions. Section 210.52. V3 allows additional small appliance branch circuits to supply other receptacles in the kitchen. However, this permission comes with important considerations. The primary consideration is the load on the circuit. The NEC requires that the circuit be adequately sized to handle the total load of all appliances connected to it. This means that you need to calculate the amperage draw of each appliance and ensure that the total does not exceed the circuit breaker rating. In most cases, small appliance branch circuits are protected by a 20 amp circuit breaker. This means that the total load in the circuit should not exceed 16 amps, which is 80% of the circuit breaker rating. This 80% deterring factor is in place to prevent the circuit breaker from tripping under normal operating conditions. To calculate the load, you need to look at the nameplate on each appliance. The nameplate will typically list the appliance's voltage and wattage. To calculate the amperage, divide the wattage by the voltage. For example, a toaster oven that is rated at 1200 watts would draw 10 amps on a 120 volt circuit. A microwave that is rated at 1000 watts would draw approximately 8.33 amps. If you connect both of these appliances to the same 20 amp circuit, the total load would be 18.33 amps, which exceeds the 16 amp limit. In this case, the circuit breaker would likely trip, especially if other appliances are also connected to the circuit. Another important consideration is the type of appliances being connected to the circuit. Some appliances, such as refrigerators and dishwashers, are considered fixed appliances. These appliances typically require their own dedicated circuits. Other appliances, such as toasters and coffee makers, are considered portable appliances. These appliances can be connected to a small appliance branch circuit provided that the total load does not exceed the circuit breaker rating. Now let's talk about best practices. Even though the NEC may permit connecting receptacles above the kitchen counter to the same small appliance branch circuit as the countertop receptacles, it is often not the best practice. As we've discussed, the kitchen is a high-demand area for power. Connecting multiple appliances to the same circuit can easily overload the circuit and cause the circuit breaker to trip. This can be inconvenient and potentially dangerous. A better practice is to install a separate circuit for the receptacles above the kitchen counter. This will ensure that there is adequate capacity for all of the appliances and reduce the risk of overloading the circuit. In addition to the load considerations, there are also safety considerations to keep in mind. The NEC requires that all receptacles be properly grounded. This means that the receptacle must be connected to a grounding wire that runs back to the electrical panel. The grounding wire provides a path for fault current to flow back to the panel, which will trip the circuit breaker and prevent electrical shock. It is also important to use the correct type of receptacle for the application. In kitchens, ground fault circuit interrupter receptacles are typically required for countertop receptacles. These receptacles are designed to protect against electrical shock by detecting small amounts of current leakage and tripping the receptacle. It's also important to consider local codes and regulations. Some jurisdictions may have additional requirements for kitchen receptacle installations. It is always a good idea to check with the local building department to ensure that you are in compliance with all applicable codes. Now let's discuss some common misconceptions about kitchen receptacle installations. One common misconception is that you can simply add more receptacles to an existing circuit without any considerations. As we've discussed, this is not the case. You need to calculate the load in the circuit and ensure that it does not exceed the circuit breaker rating. Another common misconception is that you can use extension cords to increase the number of receptacles in the kitchen. Extension cords are not intended for permanent use and can be a fire hazard if overloaded. It is always better to install additional receptacles if you need more outlets in the kitchen. Another misconception is that all receptacles are created equal. There are different types of receptacles designed for different applications. For example, tamper-resistant receptacles are required in some areas to protect children from electrical shock. It is important to use the correct type of receptacle for the application. In summary, while the NEC may allow connecting receptacles above the kitchen counter to the same small appliance branch circuit as the countertop receptacles, it is important to carefully consider the load in the circuit and ensure that you are in compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. It is often a better practice to install a separate circuit for the receptacles above the kitchen counter to ensure adequate capacity and reduce the risk of overloading the circuit. Always prioritize safety and consult with a qualified electrician if you have any questions. Remember that the NEC is a minimum standard. You can always exceed the requirements of the code to provide a safer and more reliable electrical system. For example, you could install a 20 amp dedicated circuit for each receptacle above the kitchen counter. This would provide ample capacity for even the most demanding appliances. You could also install arc fault circuit interrupter breakers to provide additional protection against electrical fires. The key is to understand the NEC requirements and use your best judgment to design an electrical system that meets your needs and provides a safe and reliable source of power. So, while it may be technically permissible to connect those upper cabinet receptacles to the existing small appliance circuits, a thorough evaluation of the existing load, potential future load, and local codes is absolutely critical. A separate circuit, while potentially adding to the initial cost, almost always proves to be the safer and more reliable long-term solution, preventing nuisance tripping and ensuring adequate power for all your kitchen appliances. And remember, electrical work is not a DIY project for the inexperienced. Always consult with a qualified electrician to ensure that your electrical installations are safe and compliant with all applicable codes. Safety should always be the top priority.